With that being said, what I want to give it to you here is some important addition. Like, how do we add a certain value to it? How do you add certain elements to it? Now, let's say const, let's say I'm going to create a simple object full name, and within that, I'm going to say, let's say if name is equal to right, and then L name is equal to Chetty. All right. This is simple. Now I want to add another. Now what this object's full name contains, Rohit and Shetty. I want to add a gender associated with it. Okay, in this particular object, which means I am trying to add a new property, and this can be done using assignment. You can go ahead and do a simple kind of an assignment. Like for example, what we can do: take the object name. Okay, dot, let's say gender. Gender does not exist in the object currently. But now what I'm trying to do, full name dot gender, I'm going to give a gender, let's say. Now if I go ahead and see the full name, which is nothing but my object, it contains a gender added. Gender property is added. So this is how you can introduce new property to a particular object, which is by assignment. Okay, create whatever the key that you want and then assign a value to it. All right, this is again in the same way. Like this, you can go ahead and modify as well. Okay, you can take the name and gender, then you want to change it. Like for example, here, let's say need not specify. Okay, something like that. So what I'm trying to do, instead of male, I'm trying to create or modify the value of a particular property. Like in earlier, the gender was stating as male, now I am stating this need not specify. Okay, something like that. All right, this is how you can modify an existing property. All right, now there are other aspects to a object that we are going to see now. So what are that? Like any object, you can go ahead and delete a property as well using a delete operator. You can go ahead and say delete and then specify the entire value what you are going to delete. That's it. Okay. Now it will return a true or false whether it is able to delete or not. And then if I go ahead and see, the gender property does not exist now because you have used the delete operator to delete one of the properties associated with the object. With that being said, let's understand one thing we have seen is a single object. Like an array, we can create a nested array. In the same way, an object with an object, you can create a nested object as well, an object within an object. Okay, that is what a nested object would be. So, how do we create that? We can do that. Like, for example, let's say const, let's go ahead and create a student. Students, maybe students is equal to, within the curly brackets, I can go ahead and create let's say um, maybe rohit rohit as an object, and this rohit will be an object. Understand that this is an object, whereas rohit is also an object. All right, and rohit, I can say favorite subject, sub. Favorite subject is, let's say, what is his favorite subject? Computers. Computers. And let's say he is having a USN number, university seat number. Okay, and that is basically a digit. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then this is going to end here. All right. So what it contains, the student contains Rohit. The Rohit has got these details. And at the same time, here I'm going to add a comma because this is one element of this. All right. This is going to be one element of this. Then I'm going to add another. Let's say I'm going to give a space. Let's say Lavanya. Okay. I'm going to add Lavanya. And Lavanya has got favorite subject. Lavanya's favorite subject is, let's say, JavaScript. She likes JavaScript. And then her USN number is 987654. All right. I'll close this. This is for this opening and closing. And then for this opening and closing, I need to again add one more curly bracket. All right. So what it contains now, guys, observe this. Const student is equal to curly brackets open here and close here. So this is one outer object. This object contains two objects in turn. One object is called Rohit and another object is called Lavanya. If I go ahead and enter, so what it contains is, let's say if I go ahead and see student, student is nothing but an object from here to here, and this object contains two other objects inside it, and they have these two values, key value pairing, key value pairing. And the outer object student contains this key as Lavanya, key as Rohit, and they contains the values which is nothing but a object. The value for Lavanya is an object. The value for Rohit is of object data type or a object data structure. Okay. Are you guys able to understand how we are going to create a array, an object within an object? Let's
Sir,
see. Tell me.
sir, I have one doubt. Like,
Yeah, go ahead.
uh, for Rohit, if we can't assign the values, then what it will happen?
If he can't assign the value, this value.
No, sir. For Rohit object, if
Ah,
we don't assign the values, computers and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
yeah,
then whether it will work, sir?
yeah, it will work, which is nothing but it, you are adding a blank object here. You can just initialize an object using open and close curly brackets. You can do that. Like, for example, what you can do is, let's say, uh, here. Now, I'll answer to this question in a minute, but before that, I'm going to add one important detail here. Okay, what is that? How do we access the elements? How do you access the values here? So, what values? Like, for example, I want to see what university seat number that Lavanya has. How do I get that? First is students dot. Then I'm going to use Lavanya because that is the property that I'm going to access. And inside that Lavanya, I'm going to use the favorite subject, university number, seat number, which is USN. So what you observe is the outer object and inner object and then its property. Okay, this is called like chaining of objects. You can chain them using dot notation, dot and dot. Okay, and now to your question. Now currently students, what it contains, students object just contain two objects, Rohit and Lavanya. Let's say I want to add another object to it which does not contain any value. So what I need to do, students dot, let's say it is nothing but Vittal. Vittal is equal to, I can go ahead and add this curly bracket. All right. Now To your point, Lavanya has got details, Rohit has got details, but Vittal has got blank, empty. It is an empty object, but still it is one of the objects within students. Okay, are you able to understand this? Just to let you know, that students is a simple nested object. All right, and at the same time, we also had what is that full name, right? Full name was also a simple object, which is a single object. This is a object within an object, which is a nested object. Let's say this full name, I want to see there are certain methods, whether there are certain properties, whether they exist within a full name. Like for example, now currently there are properties which are having a key values of first name and second name. Only two properties exist for this object called full name, and I want to see if it has certain property or not. I can do that. And for that, what I need to use is object methods. Like arrays, even objects have its own built-in methods. Like, for example, if I say full name dot, and if you see here, these are the two properties that object itself has, and there are certain properties that JavaScript inbuilt provides, like has own property. So again, this is a good object method. To string, value of. These are the object methods that JavaScript provides. Let's understand what does has own property method talks about. This so full name is an object name. Has own property, whether it has a property or not, which means f name is one property. Okay, now for example, if I go ahead and type f name, it is going to return me true, which means has own property method will check the object for this particular property name or the key name. So it exists within the object, hence it is going to return true. If I go ahead and check gender, which does not exist, the property gender does not exist, only f name and last name exists. That is the reason it is going to return me false. Hence, has own property is kind of a boolean in nature. Either it returns true or false. All right. So it will only check whether the object has a specified property or not. We have seen arrays, we have seen objects. Okay. These are the two important concepts. Now, what I want to talk about is another interesting topic. Maybe I'll introduce you to this topic. Maybe next sessions we're going to go deep dive into it. What is known as decision making. We'll talk about decision making. So prior to that, always remember in any programming language, right? There are certain concepts associated with the programming language. So what are those? First thing is how to handle the data that is being done by or data types or the data structures, which handles the data into more creative way to provide a proper output to you guys. Next in line comes the control of a program, okay, which is known as control statements. Sometimes we call it as control flow statements. What are these control flow statements? The control flow statements will be helpful for the program to execute in certain sequence. Like for example, let's say if you are going to find whether someone is eligible to vote, we saw that example already, right? If we are going to say age is greater than 18, then I'm going to execute certain code, okay, console.log, then I'm going to give a certain output, okay, which exists in this block. And then I'll go ahead and have another else statement. which is going to execute another block of statement. Here, I am trying to control the flow of my program depending on certain conditions. Okay, so these conditional execution of a block of code will be amounting to what we known as control statements. These control statements are like if else statements. Okay, if statement, else statements, if else statements, nested if statements, all these are called as a part of control statements. In that, in particularly, we call them as decision making statements. What are those decision making statements? Decision making, first, control flow statements will contain decision making statements. These decision making statements are if, then there is if else, and nested if also there. And at the same time, there is also a statement called switch statement. SWITCH. Okay, switch statements. All these are called decision making statements. Okay, they are part of this control flow. Now, what else is a part of control flow? One is this. How else you can control the flow of execution of a program? There is also something known as loop statements, or we call it as simply in words, it is loops. So what are these different kinds of loops? Very standard is for loop. Okay, for loop is at most used in control flow. One is for loop, and in JavaScript there is also known as for in loop. There is also a loop known as for in loop. One is for loop, another is for in loop, and then there is also for of loop. For of loop. Okay, now for in loop is more to the arrays, whereas for of loop we call it as in terms of this objects. And then there is while loop. There is also while loop. And then other than while loop, there is do while loop also we have got in JavaScript. I mean, like most programming language, there is for loop, while loop, and do while loop. But here in JavaScript, there is something called as for in and for of loop. We'll see how they are different and how they are in together different from a standard for loop. Next, what we have is another kind of control statements, which is called jump statements. So what are these jump statements? There are some of them. One is very standard is a break statement. Okay. Now break statement is going to be used in a switch statement as well. Okay. We can use that break statement within a switch statement. And another is continue statements. All right. So all these three, right from, I'm going to add a comment. Yeah. All these like control flow can contain decision making, which is if else, or then there is nested if you can have, and then switch statement. There can be a loops or as well, which can act as a control flow statements, and they are like for statements, for in, for off, while, and do while, and jump statements, which is break and continue. Okay, now with that being said, we will slowly concentrate on some of the topics today. What is known as decision making statements? Very standard. The very first one, which is known as decision making statements, which comprise of these three parts: if, else if, and nested if, and all that. Okay, any questions so far in control flow statements?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, flow of execution. All right, let's go to this decision making. So these decision making statements are also called as conditional statements. They most of the times because in order to make a decision making involves choose between two or three options or multiple options or only binary options. All right, there are options. We need to decide on what option is correct, that is what option you want to take in order to execute a program. And that is where your conditional statements play an important role. Again, you might have seen there is a conditional operator. We also said it to be a ternary operator or question mark operator. Okay, that is kind of a shorthand representation of an if else statement. Okay, that is very much be used in decision making. All right, now let's see the very first statement, which is known as if statement. Okay, how do we, what do we understand by if statement? All right, let's execute one example. Let's say if statement always will be followed by a certain condition. If the syntax for this will be if if followed by a condition within the brackets, or you can just write without the brackets, like for example 12 is greater than 10. This is a condition. If it is one condition, you don't have to give the parenthesis. If there are multiple conditions that you want to add, then you can go ahead and add here. Like for example, this and this, and 12 is equal to 12. So if both are true, only then you are going to execute something, which is, let's say, console.log. Let's say, oh, sorry, console.log if condition is true. All right. So what happens here? If followed by parenthesis, which is nothing but a comparison operator you are going to have, which might be here you are using a comparison operator and then you are using a logical AND operator. Combined together will give me either true or false. That is what the condition should end up in. The condition of an if statement should always end up in true or false. So that is the reason 12 is greater than 10, which is true, and 12 is equal to true. 12 is equal to 12 is also true. Both of them are true. Hence, the condition is true. Hence, the block within the if statement gets executed. That is the reason you are able to see this console log dot output, which is if condition is true. Suppose this is false. Okay, 12 is greater than 0 and 12 is equal to 10, which is false. True and false will also be false. Hence, this will not be shown in the output. Nothing is shown in the output because this, the if condition, the if block has never been entered. The code within the if block, which is the square brackets, will only be executed if this condition is true. Are you able to understand this?
Yes, sir.
Now, like the if statement, there is also something called as else statement as well. If else statement. Let's take that as an example as well. Let's see this example. If 12 is greater than 10 and 12 is equal to 10, this becomes false. If the condition is false, only then the else condition will be executed. And I'm going to add this and say if condition is false. So what is happening here? If then there is a condition, it will be checking for the condition. If this condition is true, then this block of code will be executed. Else, if this condition is false, like in this case, this block of code, else block of code will be executed. That is the reason you are seeing if condition is false, which means this condition is false. 12 is greater than 10, which is true, and logical and 10 is equal to 12 is equal to 10. This is false. So true, logical, and false will always return false. Hence, if condition will be false, that is the reason always else condition will be executed. Are you clear so far, guys?
Yes, sir.
All right. Then there is something called as nested if. Nested if is what? An if within an if is called a nested if. All right. In the same way, if nested if, there is also can be nested if else as well. Now, how does the nested if execute? Let's see that. Now, if let's say I'll take this example. If 12 is greater than this one, 12 is greater than this, and then I'm going to give console.log 12 is greater, then I can go ahead and add inside this if, let's say, if this condition holds true, then this will be executed. The moment this will be executed, then I'm going to execute this statement as well within this, which is 12 mod 2 is equal to 0. Then I'm going to say 12 is even. So understand this, guys. There is something that is happening here. Sorry. Okay. Now let's understand this. If there is a condition, this condition is true, then this block of code is executed. If this condition is false, it will exit the condition. The moment 12 is greater than 10, which is true, hence console.log 12 is greater is printed. Then the next if condition, and if within an if, this is a nested if. And now what it is saying, 12 mod 2, which is if 12 is divided by 2, what is the remainder? The remainder is 0, which is this also holds true. The moment 12 mod 2 will be 0, then 12 will be an even number. Again, there is a good check that you can do using a mod operator. That is, if it is mod 2 is equal to 0, then the number is even, else it is odd. You can add that as well here. Like for example, I can go ahead and add, this is, let's say here, I can go ahead and add the else statements. Instead of 12, I'll say number, and here also I'll say number. And this number, I can go ahead and define here, let number is equal to 12. So what it is, let number is equal to 12. So number is greater than 12, hence number is greater. Number mod 2 is equal to 0, hence number is even, else the number is odd. If I enter this, guys, can you tell me what control state, what console statements will be printed here for this particular piece of code?
Number is greater and number is evens.
Yeah, that's correct. So number is greater, number is even, because this condition will be true. Hence, this block of code will start executing the moment the first line will be printed, which is number is greater. And then it will come here and say number mod 2 is 0, which is will be the condition will be true. Then this will be executed and it will come out of the if statement, because else won't be executed the moment this is true. If this is false, like for example in this case, now if I change the number 12 to 13, in this case what will happen, number is greater will be printed, okay, and number which is 13 mod 2 will not be equal to 0, hence else condition will be executed, number is odd. Okay, so number is greater and number is odd will be added.